This is the steak guide. Today I'm gonna show you every legit way to make a steak. 27 total methods and the most famous sauces. This is a 4-step process. Step 1, let everyone know that today's video is sponsored by Google. More on that later. 2, we must identify which cut of steak we'll use. 3, we must identify which sauce belongs in the steak. And 4, which method is the best way to cook a steak. We have 3 qualified taste testers to determine each round, and once we find our winner, we'll find our steak, our sauce, and our method that might be the greatest combination of all time. But listen, we have one rule. No bull methods, recipes, techniques. We're not shooting lasers on our steak. We're not flame throwing. We're not throwing it into the sun. These are real recipes, real techniques that a real person would use. Well, I'm ready to go. The judges, including myself, will be rating this on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being roadkill, peeled off the road, and 10 being the greatest steak of their life. So let's do this, shall we?
These are the 3 most popular cuts: ribeye, New York strip, and filet mignon. We're gonna sear and prepare them exactly the same as a control method and taste test to find which cut we're gonna use for the day.
We have 1 out of 10 for 2 characteristics: tenderness and flavor. 10 for tender is the most tender, 10 for flavor is the most flavor. 1 the opposite.
Starting with New York strip. Vikram with a 5 and a 6, myself with a 5 and an 8.5, and Cam a 4.5 and an 8.
Tenderness was taking down the flavor for me. I was thinking too much about the lack of tenderness of it.
I chewed it so much that I really got to break down, does this steak actually taste good? And it did.
My thought is New York strip always tastes incredible, but it is a chewier cut for a steak. Sometimes you get tender ones, but most of the time you don't. Ribeye next.
Vikram, a 9 and a 9. Myself, 6.75 and 9.25. Finally, Cam for 7.5 and an 8.5.
Because it was so tender, all the juices just hit my mouth, so it was more flavorful.
In a way, you get like multiple meals in one. You have this like tender, fatty rib cap that's always tender, always fatty, always delicious. And then you have a centerpiece that is a little more tender than New York strip, but has more flavor.
Next,
Filet mignon.
and Vikram coming in with a 10 and a 7, myself a 10 and a 5, and Cam a 9.5 and an 8.
It was a hard choice. I will say the filet mignon was better than I thought it would be because I put the salt on top and it soaked into the meat. So that's a benefit, but that's just saltiness, which everybody loves. But it always lacks in flavor in comparison to the other 2. So it wins in tenderness, but in flavor to me, it's like a 5.
Now we tally up our winners.
In last place, the New York strip at 37 points, by far lowest. In second place with 49.5 points, the filet mignon. Surprisingly good number, considering I talked a little bit of. And in first place is my favorite cut, the ribeye, coming in at 50 points, only 0.5 points above the filet mignon, which is kind of a surprise, but I do want to clarify. The filet mignon makes sense in this context, being cooked like this with the salt on top. It's kind of the perfect way to prepare it. But in a lot of these other methods, I think it probably would have drowned. You even get a little too much of that gray band from overcooking. It's gonna be dry, it's gonna be flavorless. I'm glad we went with the ribeye. This is the perfect steak for this video. So with that being said, let's begin.
Okay, so we know what we're cooking, but I have to say something before we dig in.
These every way videos are big and they require a lot of hard work from my team. We're eating for 10 to 12 hours a day, lots of editing, so I decided to get them some gifts. They're not the easiest group to shop for, so I got a little bit of help from today's sponsor, Google. You see, Google's Holiday 100 is a list of gift ideas based on search trends that defined our year. In tandem with advanced tools and filters to help you pull off all of your holiday shopping, no matter who it's for. Cameron, the culinary assist, is a man of simple needs. He is the BYOB to your party. That is exactly how I stumbled upon this Yeti cooler from the Nature and Nurture collection. So he'll always have a cold drink or be ready for a cookout at any time, anywhere. Now Maya, my post-production supervisor, can do anything when it comes to editing video. But even after all these years, she doesn't consider herself a great cook. Maya, we know that's not true. But I'm so happy the It's Electric collection had one of my favorite things, the Zoji Rushi rice cooker. Perfect rice every time for anybody. Last but not least, Vikram the director, who has to always be prepared. Tell you what he's not prepared for, this new dog he got. But that's exactly why I went to the Finishing Touches collection and found these perfect dog shoes. Don't all puppies need little booties? Thank you again to Google for sponsoring today's video. Check it out in the link in the description.
Now let's move on to our sauces, starting with
Commercial steak sauce.
Vikram, a 2. Me? Oh, a 3. Generous. And a 6? Really? Total 11.
It's average.
It is unbearably tangy.
It's the most unbalanced steak sauce that there is. You might as well just mix lemon juice and Worcestershire sauce and call it a day. It doesn't taste bad, it just doesn't belong on anything.
I'd rather just make my own sauce.
I f with commercial steak sauce.
Our next sauce, Hollandaise. One of the most notable base French mother sauces. I'm a fan. Look, it's easy, but it's an annoying test of your skills in emulsification. You whisk together some egg yolks, lemon juice, in a bowl, set over a pot of simmering water, whisk till doubled in size. Make sure the bowl isn't touching the water, or else you'll make scrambled eggs. Slowly stream in some melted clarified butter, whisking continuously, taking on and off the heat, and eventually you should be left with a beautiful thick consistency like this. Season to taste with salt, pepper, and a pinch of cayenne, and now we taste. Vikram a 5, me a 5, and Cam another 6. Total score 16.
I've always felt that hollandaise is very middle of the ground in the world of sauces. It's light, it's fragrant, it's buttery. It doesn't belong on everything.
It has its purposes.
It's basically the foundation for so many more sauces, so it makes sense that it really scores middle of the road.
We're moving on to béarnaise, very similar to hollandaise, which I'm going to use a different method because whisking in the bowl was annoying me. So we just take large container, add some egg yolks, then use a stick blender, blend until pale, add a little bit of vinegar, drizzle in melted butter, blending the whole time till thickened and beautiful. Then you season with a little bit of white wine, lemon juice, salt, fresh chopped tarragon, maybe a little bit of finely chopped chervil. Finish with black pepper, and that's what it looks like. Looks a little nicer, but is a few ingredients really gonna make this that much better than hollandaise? Vikram 8.5, me an 8, and from Cam an 8.5. Total score 25, a new leader, shockingly higher score.
Oh! One of my favorite sauces, I think it goes really well with French fries, of all things.
It's very Belgian of you.
The better version of hollandaise.
It's just a fragrance from the tarragon and the chervil. It's just so nice and herbaceous, but you still have the richness of the butter, and you still have the balance of the acidity from the vinegar or lemon juice or whatever you're putting in there. This is the ultimate balance right here.
I literally have nothing to say because Josh just says it all.
Moving on to bordelaise, another French classic. It's red wine based, in some butter, shallots, garlic, sauteed, add some red wine, reduced by half, then demi-glace. Yeah, that's heavily reduced beef and or veal stock. Whisk together, maybe add a little actual beef stock. This demi-glace a little thick. Reduce it a bit more and melt with cold butter. That's it. You pass it and we taste it. Vikram a 7, me an 8, and Cam an 8. Total score of 23.
Bordelaise is arguably one of the most perfect sauces that could go on a piece of beef. It's rich, but it has a little bit of tang, it has a little bit of sweetness from the wine, but it still has that unctuous, dark flavor that you want on a cut of steak.
There's a reason you see it on menus everywhere, especially at steakhouses.
I agree with all the points. It's a great sauce. I just happened to give it a point lower.
Vikram's just mean today. Moving on.
To Diane. This is a classic steak sauce. Could it be a new leader? I don't know. Again, in some butter, saute shallots, garlic. Yeah, the French clearly really like these things. I get it. Add some beef stock, followed by demi-glace, whisk in mustard, Worcestershire, Tabasco. Add some cream, let it reduce slightly. Season with salt and pepper to taste. Maybe a little bit of finely chopped parsley. And now we taste.
Whoa, sick trick. It smells like tomatoes, despite the fact that there's no tomato in here.
Vikram, ooh, a 3. Ooh, another 3. And a 4. Total score of 10. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
I've never really liked steak Diane that much. Feels like a lesser iteration of other sauces. But it's also based on how good your demi-glace is.
Sauce tastes great when it's beef stroganoff.
Still muted in flavor, kind of under average for me. Nothing I'd really come back to.
Moving on to chimichurri, one of my most favorite additions to steaks of all time. This is honestly very easy. Bowl, chopped parsley, Fresno chili, shallots, garlic, red wine vinegar, olive oil, season with salt and pepper, and stir and taste. Vikram a 6.5. Okay, well, maybe he doesn't like the oil. I don't know. Me, a 7.5 and an 8. Total score 22.
I think chimichurri is probably one of the most diverse steak sauces in the game. It balances out any steak. It goes with any steak.
It's a really well-balanced sauce. Herbaceousness with the pops of vinegar, great mouthfeel from the olive oil.
I think it's a very specific flavor profile that doesn't really go across a ton of things, but it's a very enjoyable sauce.
On to our last sauce, au poivre. This is probably one of the most classic French steak sauces I can think of. But beating out béarnaise with an almost perfect score of 25 is gonna be tough. So first, garlic and shallots sauteed in butter. I mean, I don't see how this can be that different considering it's the exact same base, but whatever. Once that's cooked, you're gonna add some lightly crushed peppercorns, a little bit of cognac, reduced to au sec, which is essentially nearly dry. Then add your cream, reduced by half, mount with cold butter, pass through a fine mesh strainer, a couple more cranks of pepper, some salt if needed, and now we taste. Vikram, with an 8.5 and 8.7, we need a minimum of a 7.9 from Cam for this sauce to win. And Cam comes in with a shocking 9. Au poivre has won the king of steak sauces today.
Not only is the au poivre balanced and rich and viscous and salty, but it's got little flecks and pops of spice. It's not aggressive.
It was such a tough call between the béarnaise and this one, but this one is more clean, and that's, I think, the best quality of this sauce.
It hits.
But we've barely begun. Now we're moving on to the most exciting decision that we're gonna make today. We have to figure out the greatest steak cooking method of all time. Once we figure that out, hopefully combined with the greatest steak sauce, it should be the ultimate steak experience. Now on to our methods. First up, air fryer. I'm really tired of this machine, you know? First, I talked about how I hated it, then you guys got mad, then I started liking it, and then you guys were still mad, and so then I started disliking it, and now I'm back to disliking it. But look, we're gonna give it a fighting chance. So, all of these ribeyes will be seasoned with salt and pepper only. No special seasonings, no MSG. We cannot let anything screw up the judging here. So, put your seasoned steak into a 400-degree preheated air fryer, cook for 5 minutes, flip, and cook for 5 more. Transfer to a wire rack lined baking tray to rest, and now we rate. Vikram a 5, me a 4, and Cam a 5. Yeah, 14. Not great.
Very on the line of average, which is what a 5 means to me.
Texture's nice, it's cooked nice, but there's just like such a serious lack of flavor overall. It's a letdown.
It's cooked perfectly, but that's about it. There's a slight plastic aftertaste.
If you have the money to buy a steak, the last place it should be going is an air fryer.
God, so true.
Just put it in anything else.
Moving on to a slow cooker. Yeah, Josh, try another convenience item. Oh my God, it's gonna be great. Look, I have to respect this steak, so we're gonna season it, we're gonna sear it first on both sides, till brown, deglaze with beef stock, put all that into your slow cooker, and leave it on high for 1.5 hours. Good Lord. Move to a cutting board, rest, slice, serve, and we rate. Vikram a 0. I respect that. Me, a shockingly high 3. Cam, a 1. Total score, 4. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I got the highest score here. I'm disappointed in myself. I'm sorry.
I can't eat that. Yeah.
It's very gummy.
Everything outside the rib cap you can't eat, so it's a 0.
You know when you go to your friend's house and your friend's dad is like, I'm gonna make pot roast today, kids? This is what you get.
Mouthfeel alone, I could barely get through it. That is honestly one of the worst things I've ever eaten.
Really?
Agree.
As soon as I put it in my mouth, I almost spit it back out.
Yeah, I did spit it back out.
By any classification, this is so far away from a steak.
Next, pressure cooker. Can pressure cooking actually make a better steak? Well, we're gonna find out. Sear your seasoned steak in your pressure cooker, flip, add some beef stock, pop your lid on, switch to pressure cooking mode for 10 minutes, release the steam, and good Lord. Wow, that looks rough. Well, rest, slice, serve, and taste. A 1, a 2, and a 1. Yeah, it's another 4.
I'm fighting for my life right now. Even the rib cap is dry.
It got a 1 for showing up. That's the 6 participation point.
My thought was, at least there's food. The second layer of good was it was tender, quite literally 0 flavor.
Only a pressure cooker can make a steak dry yet tender.
That other one I had was worse. It's just not a steak anymore.
No, it's like a pot roast that was left in the sun. Moving on.
Oh, yay, a microwave. As you can see, I was so happy to see that we were using this apparatus. The sad part is, out of many of the methods we've done here, this one is used far more frequently than should be legally allowed. Does this really require an explanation? It's seasoned, it goes on a plate. 2 minutes, flip. Oh, wow, it looks like I'm shocked. Cook for an additional 2.5 minutes and enjoy. A 1, a 1.5, and a 0. 2.5.
I gave it a 1.5. It's very generous. Here's why. It didn't taste as bad as I thought it would, but it is still in the category of the ones because it is quite literally the worst steak I've ever eaten.
What it has going for it is you can still taste the salt and the pepper. What it has against it is everything else. There's no texture, it's chewy, there's no crust. Rather just eat salt and pepper on its own.
That's all you can taste is the salt and pepper. And you microwaves.
Yeah, let's move on.
Toaster, yeah. I think this went viral like 5 years ago and then people actually started doing it, unironically. And if you are one of those people, I would like you to call somebody for psychiatric help. So trim off some excess fat so this doesn't burst into flames. Pop it in, drop it. I have absolutely no idea how long this should be in there. Let's say 5 minutes, pull it out. Okay, it's got a sort of color on it. Pop onto a wire rack and we serve. Vikram a 3, me a 4, and Cam a 3. Total score 10. Should probably be lower.
Flavor profile identical to movie theater popcorn, and the method was just shoving it in a toaster.
This had the weirdest flavor I've ever tasted in a steak in my entire life. There could be a world where this is good, just not in the world of eating a steak.
Next, indoor electric grill. Not really recipe here. You season it, you put it on, you close it, and wait till the light turns green. That's it. Rest it, slice, serve. And the voters come in with a 3, a 3.75, and another 3, coming in at a total score of 9.75. To translate, not good.
It's dry and overdone, which big L, but it retained a nice salt crust because there wasn't any juice to dilute the salt.
Texture aside, the taste was pleasant. Not pleasant enough to eat more of it.
There was good flavor in the steak, but I've also had better steaks and I've also had worse steaks.
This is a steak that you get whenever you go to Golden Corral and it's just sitting there in that hot plate for 3 hours.
Now, on to a big one, sous vide. Guga, if you're watching, I'm praying for you on this one, buddy. This is probably one of the most popular methods for quote-unquote the best steak you can possibly make at home. So surely this should rate extremely high, right? Seasoned steak, vacuum seal it, cook it in a water bath at 1 hour at 54 Celsius, remove, pat dry, sear on both sides, rest, slice. Look at the cook on this. So hopefully it rates high, right? Vikram gives an 8. I gave a 6. Wow. And another 8. Total score of 22.
I eat sous vide steak 3 times a week. It's easy when you're at home to sear it off. It's even, and you don't really ever have a bad bite. So sous vide steak to me will always be up top on the list.
This steak is cooked perfectly. It tastes great, but there's something about the texture that is off. Otherwise, it would have been a 10 for me.
I'll be honest, I don't eat that many sous vide steaks. I'd never really want to commit the time to waiting an hour for my steak to get to a perfect medium rare. And so the time element is a huge L, but it is cooked perfectly. And it tastes great. And I know this comes down to the cut of beef. The one thing that surprised me though, is this steak was shockingly chewy, and I really thought the sous vide would fix it, and it didn't. A perfect steak maybe would be an 8, but this is getting a 6.
Moving on to Searzall. This is an attachment for a commercial grade blowtorch that diffuses the flame. So we have our seasoned steak, we rub some oil on it, and we use the Searzall on it. Well, for actually quite a while. We were running that thing around and around until it gets nice color on both sides, and the internal temp is around medium rare, 135 Fahrenheit. Let it rest, slice, and serve. We got a 4, and a 6. Total score 14. Yeah, that sounds about right.
It was slightly above average.
It was slightly below average. There's a weird aftertaste with this one.
It takes so long, and you have unevenly cooked beef. You don't know what part's medium, what part's rare, and ultimately the whole thing was undercooked.
Moving on to broil. Seasoned steak on a wire rack, pop into a broil over low for about 5 to 8 minutes, flipping through halfway the cook time. It comes out, and now it's time for a taste test. With a 4, a 7, and a 7.5. I rated this higher than I did the sous vide. I don't know how that happened, but there we go.
It just wasn't anything special.
It's the lowest effort steak so far, but it has flavor that I wasn't expecting. It tastes great. It retained a lot of juice. Somehow the broiling allowed the salt to really penetrate it, which I appreciate.
Good cook, good texture. It wasn't anything like way too up there, but it was definitely very above average.
If a broil's good, then what about a plain old roast? You're gonna need a thicker steak for this, obviously. So we have a very hot oven, no broiler whatsoever. Seasoned steak goes in, and it gets blasted for about 20 to 25 minutes until medium rare. Pull it out, rest, and serve. An 8, which is my highest score so far, and an 8.5. We have a new first place with roast, 24.5.
This is shockingly good. I think that the roasting made it more tender while maintaining a really even cook. We didn't slather it with oil and rub it all over. It was a raw piece of steak, patted dry, salt, pepper, put it in the oven.
I agree with everything you just said. Super tender. It's just a very good, enjoyable bite. The only places I'm docking points here, it doesn't fully taste like a steak. It's unevenly cooked as well. There are parts that are a little more dry. There's a way to make this tender all the way around. I think that'd be straight up 10 for me.
I kind of disagreed with the technique behind it, but I was pleasantly surprised.
Moving on.
We're going outside for next cooking method, propane grill. The Wayfair portable grill that I found in the Nature and Nurture collection from Google's Holiday 100, today's sponsor. You know, I'm hard to shop for. I have pretty much every culinary tool that exists. I saw this grill and was kind of shocked when I realized I didn't own something this portable, and you can quite literally just toss it in the trunk. So I just hit shop now, was taken to a Google search results page where I bought it from Wayfair.com. This obviously works with any propane grill, so season your steak on one side, put that side on your preheated grill, season the top half, sear for 2 to 3 minutes, quarter turn, another 1 to 2 minutes, and then flip. See, that's quadrillage right there. You like that, buddy? Sear on the other side, same as before, rest, slice, and taste. Vikram, an 8.2, me, a 7, and a 7.8. Total score, a strong rating.
The only thing you miss out on with a grill is that sear.
In a pan, you get 100% crust. On a grill, now moving on.
Not everyone has a propane grill. So what about just a indoor grill pan? Heat it over medium high, ripping hot, get some oil on it, sear your seasoned steak on both sides in it, let it rest, slice, and taste. We come in with a 2, a 6, and a 6. So yeah, not as good. 14 total points.
It's not as bad as I thought it would be.
You're not getting a good crust on it. You're not getting any added flavors, and so I gave it a 2.
Not great. On to the next.
Next up, the plancha, also known as a griddle. There's a lot of names for these things. So you heat it over high heat, oil the surface, seasoned steak goes down, sear on both sides, till it's cooked to the desired temp, rest, slice, and taste. So we have our first rating with a 7.5, a 7, and an 8, 22.5.
To me, someone had like a charred taste to it.
Didn't get an even sear, so I think kind of like that lock in of flavor wasn't fully there. It's an above average steak.
Above average on the plancha. Moving on, cha.
But speaking of Maillard, what about quite literally deep frying a whole steak? Surely you'd get the greatest Maillard of all time, and we did. Season on both sides with salt and pepper, you drop it into a fryer set to 350 Fahrenheit, cook until about a 128 internal temp is reached, pull it out. Look at this thing, this is ridiculous. Rest, slice, and let's rate. We have our very first vote coming in at a 4, a 6, and a 2? I mean, I liked it. I thought it was good. Total score, 12.
The whole thing just tastes like oil.
From a technique standpoint, I think that there's a world where this could be really good.
The steak made me want to throw up.
Moving on.
Deep frying by itself, not great. But what about one of my mom's favorite recipes? Chicken fried steak. See, my mom hails from a little old state called Texas. I know how to make a chicken fried steak. So you get your ribeye, pound it thin, so it gets dipped in buttermilk. To make this fair, we're just gonna use salt and pepper. We're not gonna use any special spices, otherwise that's an unfair advantage in my opinion. Drenched in flour and shallow fried. Looks nice. First rating, a big 9 from Vikram. Me, a 6 and a 5. Total score, 20.
To me, it was average.
Each one of these steaks have only been seasoned with 2 things, salt and pepper. Most proper technique steaks, that's all they really need. Chicken fried steak, on the other hand, needs a lot of other things. Plain as it is, does not score as high, but I did give it a 6 because it's nostalgic.
The outside is crunchy and crispy. It hits the mark for me.
Moving on.
Moving on to poached. We're not just going to poach this in water. We're gonna poach this in a butter bath until it reaches an internal temperature of 125. After that, we'll pat it dry and sear it to get some nice color. I mean, surely submerging the steak in butter is gonna be the best, right? So our ratings come in at a 3.5, a 5, and a 5. 13.5.
Flavor-wise, I do detect the butter, but it's not revolutionary, and you can get that by basting it, so 5.
So you go to a movie and you get popcorn and you douse it in butter, you're not really tasting the popcorn itself. It's more like a vehicle for the butter, and that to me is what this steak is.
I just wasted a bunch of butter for no reason. Now, while this isn't my personal favorite way to cook a steak, it's a classic. It's the charcoal grill. Seasoned steak onto a hot charcoal grill, sear on both sides with a beautiful crisp browning. Rest, slice, taste. And we have our ratings coming in at a 4, a 5, and a 7. Total score is 16. It's all right.
There's nothing new or inventive about this steak.
It's a nice beefy flavor, but to me, it was just slightly above average.
And Hank Hill will be happy to hear that propane beat charcoal. Now go get your accessories, brother. Next up, a stir fry. Now, woks are a great way to cook anything, period. So stir fry should score pretty high. So I cut my steak into large cubes, add it to a hot wok, give it that traditional wok hang till the steak reaches about medium rare, get some nice color. Of course, we seasoned it with salt and pepper, and now we rate. A 7, a 5, and a 6. Total score, 18. Not bad.
I think it's a good base to a lot of stir fries, and I think the wok hei puts it a little higher than average.
Moving on.
Moving on to tartare. Pause. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, wait a minute. Is tartare really a method because it's not cooked? That's true. But eating raw steak, whether it's carpaccio or tartare, is a classic preparation of steak that just about every chef in the world has respect and love for. So we have to at least put it in the mix. We took the leanest, most tender part of the ribeye, added some diced shallot, capers, cornichon, chopped parsley, Dijon, raw egg yolk, salt and pepper, a little Worcestershire, red wine vinegar, and stirred while getting emulsified with a little olive oil. It's a classy thing. We even pulled out the old school 2005 ring mold. Aren't we all happy about that? Now, let's rate. 1. All right, Vikram, come on. A 6 and an 8.5 for a total score of 15.5.
My only problem is that I don't think ribeye is the right cut for a tartare.
I loved it. I'm gonna take another bite before they take the plate away.
I don't see the hype about putting raw meat on a plate. You could probably get that same flavor with cooked meat. As far as steak goes, it's not steak, it's its own thing.
All right, moving on.
Next up, pizza oven. Preheat a cast iron pan for 5 minutes in a very hot pizza oven. I'm talking like around 600 Fahrenheit. Once it's hot, pull it out, add a little bit of oil, add your seasoned steak, pop it back in. Once it's nice and brown, flip and repeat on the other side. We want to try to keep this medium rare. So we rest, slice, and taste. Vikram, an 8.5, myself, a 7, and a 7.5. Total score, 23.
Tastes great. I'm definitely making more steaks in the pizza oven.
It's crispy on the outside, tender on the inside.
It wasn't my favorite, but it definitely had some special qualities to it.
Moving on.
This next one is a method that has become probably one of the most popular ways to cook a steak. Reverse sear. So, you season the steak, you place it on a wire rack lined baking tray, and you're actually gonna put this immediately in a very low oven, 200 Fahrenheit, about 25 to 30 minutes or until perfectly cooked, and you sear in a cast iron pan on both sides. You sear for about 30 seconds, and look at this. This is the fastest, most beautiful, perfect Maillard I have ever seen on a steak, and it is thanks to reverse sear. You rest, you slice, and it has a perfect cook. And now we rate. We have an 8, a 7.8, and a 7, 22.8. So not quite a winner, but very good.
I felt like every square inch of this steak had more flavor than any of the other steaks so far.
It really packed a punch.
I think texturally, it just was not there for me.
Yeah, I would have rated this probably an 8.5 if the texture was better. Moving on.
Moving on to a classic method for fish, but you could really do it with anything. Salt baked. So you just combine some salt with some water, make a nice little bed, put our steak on it, mound the rest of the salt mix on top, bake in the oven, pull it out, pop her open, and God, that looks awful. This is one of the ugliest steaks I think I've ever seen. There's absolutely zero chance of this doing well. So we have our first rating coming in at an 8.3 23.3. Whoa, a 7.5 and an 8, a 23.8. I'm shocked.
The crazy thing is there's no Maillard on this whatsoever. If you fed this to me with my eyes closed, I would think it was seared.
I thought it was gonna make me sick. It looked like a steak from Resident Evil.
What was missing to me and what didn't take this to the higher level is the lack of that sear and that crust.
Great work, Salt Bake. Moving on.
Next, braised, one of my favorite cooking methods. So we seared our steak on both sides, remove it from the pot, add some aromatic, saute, a little tomato paste, more aromatics, cook it down, deglaze with white wine, beef stock. I mean, this is a whole ass process. Bring that up to a boil, reduce to a simmer, add your steak, cover it, and let that simmer until it reaches an internal temp of about 130 Fahrenheit. Remove, rest, slice, rank. A 7, a 6, and a 2. Total score, 15.
You still get the sear and all the other flavors that it's braising with go into the meat. So it's a deeper flavor.
So deep. That tastes like some sort of pot roast. It's not what I look for in a steak, so I gave it a 6.
There's something that's off about it, and I think it's because it's a steak.
Moving on.
On to what is historically probably one of the worst performing methods on all of these types of videos, steamed. So we place a steam basket over a pot of simmering water, pop our steak in, and cook until an internal temp of 125. I'll tell you one thing, it found a way to make steak smell pretty gross. Now we pulled it out, it was so gross smelling that I had to sear it in order to eat it. So we seared for 30 seconds, and we got a surprisingly good Maillard sear on it. I mean, there's a lesson here. Something about par cooking and then finishing with a hot sear kinda equals a good Maillard. Now we rest, and God help this steak. Vikram, an 8.5, a 6.9, and an 8.5, a total score of 23.9. Were we expecting this disgusting looking steak to actually do this well?
I feel like it lost a little bit of flavor from the steaming process. Everything else about this steak is incredible. Way more tender than any steak I've ever had.
This like exceeded expectations. It's more tender than the sous vide, but you still get the good crust on the outside.
Moving on.
Next, a smoked steak. This is the exact method that won in our every way to make a burger. So I'm thinking beef and beef. This could be our victor. So we season our steak, salt and pepper, into a smoker. Low temp, let it smoke, pull it out, sear on both sides real quick. Rest, slice, a nice cook, and let's rate. An 8, an 8.7, this could be our first place, and an 8.5, a total score of 25.2. I am shocked.
It's really good for a bite, but I think if I were to eat like a whole steak that's smoked like this, by the end I would be super over it.
I love it. This tastes like a bite of Texas.
And now for the tandoor. This is not a traditional method, as you might have guessed, but the tandoor is underrated. It's also unrealistic for most people, but nonetheless, we cut our steak into large chunks, rub with olive oil, season with salt and pepper, and skewer it on a traditional tandoor skewer. Popped it in there, cooked until perfectly browned and medium rare. Take it out, pop onto a plate, and taste. Vikram, a 10, an 8, and a 9. We have a new first place at a total score of 27 points. I did not think this would take the lead.
This is the only steak we've had today that is crispy yet melts in your mouth. I don't see a single thing wrong with it.
Flavor-wise, it is really good and steaky. Juiciness-wise, it's really high.
It's really concentrated beef flavor. It's a really good steak.
Moving on.
This leaves us with only one more steak, and it is what I believe to be the greatest cooking method for any steak, but the only real determination of that is the voting round. Will seared steak beat out the tandoor, or will an unlikely steak cooking method reign king? This is the way restaurants do their stuff. I mean, surely it's the best. So we'll season our steak. We have a hot pan. We sear it on both sides, about 1 to 2 minutes each. Once it's been flipped, you add just a little bit of butter, and to make it fair, we're not gonna add any aromatics, just plain butter, but this isn't just about adding flavor. This is quite literally the traditional practice in restaurants. So we're gonna baste with our beautiful foamy butter as it browns, delectably looking beautiful. Once it reaches a beautiful medium rare, remove from the pan and rest. Slice, a gorgeous cook on this. I think we might have a first place winner. So now we rate. An 8.8, an 8.5. Oh my God. The only way this wins is if Cam gives it a 10. Oh, and he comes in with a 9. Total score, 26.3. That means that my favorite steak method did not win. The winner is now officially the tandoor cooked steak, but it doesn't stop here. We have to combine this with the greatest steak sauce to see. Is this truly the greatest steak sauce combo? Let's taste.
An unexpected and unlikely combination. 2 different cultures from across the globe have come together. Let's taste.
That's insane. This one I can say for certain is the best steak we've had.
We got exactly what we wanted out of this. A perfect bite of steak. This needs absolutely nothing else.
I'm gonna think about this tonight when I get home.
I don't even know what to say. I actually don't know what to say. That's another massive every way video in the bag. The crew has their gifts for all their hard work. Thank you again to Google for sponsoring today's video. Check it out in the link in the description. This is what's gonna help you find everything you need for all the people in your life. Also, a quick shout out to Wayfair, their portable grill. I'm actually a huge fan of it, which is exactly why we are giving one away. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled on my Instagram to see how you can enter to win one yourself. You're gonna like it. Anyway, love you. Bye.